Have you ever been to an interview and heard this? Tell me about yourself. It's kind of a dreaded question. You're not sure where to start, what to say, or maybe you met someone new and you've got to tell that person about yourself and about what makes you tick. Other people may ask us who we are, but many of us are actually asking ourselves the same question. So, how do we tell someone else who we are when we're trying to figure out our own identity? My name is Terry Barton, and my goal is to help you navigate the issues and concerns you have by bringing the Christian worldview into the conversation. And today's topic of conversation is identity. So, what is identity? Identity is really kind of how we think of ourselves and how we describe ourselves to others. For example, if I just met you, I might say, I'm a mother. I've got an adult child. He's X number of years old. Um, I'm also a wife, been married X number of years. And I might mention too how I'm in the accounting field. So, in that description of myself, things that make up my identity, I've given you three different elements, right? So, that's how I might describe myself to someone else. But when I'm thinking about myself, I might think of myself a little bit differently. Those things may not be the first thing on my mind. For example, sometimes when I'm being overly critical to myself, I'll think of how I'm such a perfectionist and how many times I procrastinate doing the things I need to do because I'm actually afraid of messing up. So that might not be something I would just tell the world, but in my mind, it's going through my head that I identify as a procrastinator, I identify as a perfectionist. There's many different things we may call ourselves in our heads, and that is actually part of our identity. So, one of the factors that may go into your identity is your experiences. We have different experiences when we're kids, when we're teenagers, when we're adults. Throughout our lives, we'll have many different experiences that could impact how we see ourselves and then how we then identify ourselves. For example, if you were a kid growing up with people all around you telling you how you were making good grades and that you were doing well in school, you could see that even for yourself with the report card coming back. Maybe you saw yourself then as smart, and you may take that with you for your entire lifetime, right? Seeing yourself as a smart person. That may be one of the ways you identify with yourself. Um, Another factor that can go into your identity is your relationships. Now, those could be things like what I said earlier, how I'm a mother, how I'm a wife. So, those relationships that I have with other people can be something that becomes a part of my identity. Also, we may have, relationships with people where it helps us learn something about ourselves. And maybe those things we've learned from those experiences are then a part of our identity from that point on. Maybe our friends tell us that we're funny and that they enjoy being around us. And so then we see ourselves as like fun loving and carefree, friendly, those kind of things. Our values can also play a role in our identity. So, if we value honesty in other people, we may actually see ourselves as an honest person because we put that emphasis on that item. And so we're careful to always tell the truth, or at least to not lie. So, that can have an impact on how we identify ourselves to others and how we even think of ourselves as well. Our identity may also be made up of characteristics about ourselves. So it could be something like being left handed. So I'm left handed. So I may, in certain circumstances, actually point that out as part of my identity. Another thing that goes into identity is sexual orientation. Now, of course, this is a big thing today. A lot of people will kind of make their entire identity based on just sexual orientation But as you can already see, there's plenty of other factors that go into our identity. But this is another one of them. And also, religious beliefs can be a part of our identity. I, for example, do identify as a Christian. And you'll see that in one of the parts coming up where I will pull from the Bible. Because remember, we want to have conversations where I pull in the Christian worldview and just give a different perspective. So, again, we have factors such as experiences, relationships, the values, our characteristics, sexual orientation, and religious beliefs that play into our identity. So, there's a couple of truths about identity that I want to talk about. The first thing is that our identity, or at least how we describe ourselves, how we think of ourselves, it can change. Now, you may be like, no, surely our identity is immutable. It'll never change. But if you've been a kid and you grew up and you thought, oh, I'm a rock star, I'm a singer, I'm a whatever, and then you grew out of it, then you know identity can change. But even as an adult, let me give you an example. So, before I was married, I was single and then I got married. So that kind of changes my identity, right? Then I can say, oh, I'm a wife. Well, if I got divorced, then I wouldn't be telling people that I'm so and so's wife anymore. Um, if my husband dies, well, then I may tell people that I'm a widower so that they understand something about me that's important for them to know, or at least that I think is important for them to know. It's also important to know that your identity should not be dictated to you by other people. So, not your parents, not your friends, not your family, not the culture. None of those things should really be telling you who you are, or who you should be, or who you have to be. Other people or our culture, even, can make you feel like you have to identify yourself a certain way, you have to describe yourself a certain way. And sometimes they're just wrong about it. Now, I'm not saying that you can't take what those people closest to you, the ones who love you, the ones that you love back. I'm not saying that you shouldn't take what they're saying, what they're telling you. Um, I'm not saying you should take it for granted, that you should just completely ignore them. I'm not actually saying that. I am saying that you do have to decide for yourself who you are. If you don't decide that for yourself, you'll ask yourself that question even more and you'll struggle with it even more. You've probably heard the phrase be true to yourself. And that is one way that you can identify who you are, figure out who you are. Um, that way of doing it is based largely on, feelings, how you feel at the time. It can be based on things you've read, and then something resonates with you, and so you kind of hold on to that. But the thing is that being true to yourself, if it's based on feelings, well, your feelings can change over time. Just because one week you feel one way doesn't mean you'll feel the same way the next week. Maybe this way you're very comfortable identifying a certain way, and then a week or two, a month down the road, you know, there's some sort of upheaval in your life, or something about the way you've identified seems a little off now, and you're just not sure anymore. That up and down can create a lot of anxiety and confusion, and it can be very frustrating. So, the other option for trying to establish what your identity is and figure it out would be to base it on some sort of solid truth. Now, what I'm talking about with that is that real truth, something that's unchanging, something that can be foundational, something that when the culture's going crazy or your feelings are all over the place, something that you can then come back to and know that that thing is your rock. It won't change. It's always the same. And it gives you a way to find comfort no matter what's going on. And it gives you perhaps and probably the most truest sense of self and of your identity that you can get. So, what is truth? What is truth? Where does it come from? Because I'm talking about truth, something that is true no matter what, and it doesn't change. Now, you might get truth from science, you might get truth from what your parents tell you, provided that whatever they've told you is something that literally doesn't change. But I personally like to get truth from the Bible. The Bible's been around a really long time, and things that are written in it haven't changed. I know it's really unpopular to say that the Bible is a source of truth. Um, but I submit to you that it actually is. And it also speaks about our identity. It can really help us understand who we are. So, the first thing that the Bible tells us about who we are is that we are created in God's image. In Genesis 1:27 through 28, it says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" So when we see that it says God created man in his own image, that means that we actually resemble him. Now, not in all ways, and it doesn't mean we're gods. Don't hear what I'm not saying. We literally just resemble him. Like some of his characteristics, some of his um, ways of being, we resemble him in some of those ways. One of them is that he's relational, right? So he created people and he wants to have a relationship with them. We as people want to have relationships with other people. Now you might say, well, I'm an introvert and I don't really want to have a lot to do with other people. But I think if you were actually honest about it, you just don't want to have a relationship with a lot of people, but you do have an inner circle. There's a few people that you really gravitate towards and that you're willing to keep in your life. Also, we see that God is creative and we are also creative. I mean, just look around at all the people who have made music and paintings and YouTube videos, all the podcasters out there creating content. Um, God created the whole earth, and here we are on earth creating all kinds of things as well. So we're like Him in that way too. And because He created us, we have dignity. Our lives are important, they're valuable, and we get all of that from the fact that He made us. And like God, we have work to do. In verse 28, it mentioned having dominion, right? To have dominion is going to require some work. So, work is not a bad thing. It actually gives us a lot of purpose in our lives. It does contribute to our identity as well. Remember, I mentioned that I'm in accounting. So that becomes a part of my identity also. And having dominion, just as a side note, having dominion means cultivating. So wherever we go, we're cultivating things, whether that's inside the home, we're cultivating a comfortable, loving, welcoming environment for other people to possibly come into, for ourselves to live in. And when we're at work, we're cultivating whatever it is that our job is made up of, right? Also, from the Bible, we see that humans were created male and female. So it's one or the other. That's, we're either going to have XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes. And even Jesus referred back to this. In Mark 10, verse 6, it says, But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. So even in Jesus's time, so 2,000 years ago, he's still referring back to the fact that we are male and female. Now, I know it's unpopular to say that, but it does come down to science. It's not just the Bible. Science shows us we've got the chromosomes that determine our, as everyone refers to, biological sex. Now, I know everybody talks about gender and they want to say it's different, but there is, if we're using the Bible as our foundational truth for identity, there's nowhere in it that it talks about there being other options. It's just male and female. Also, we see from the Bible that we're loved. So we're told this in John 3:16. We're actually told this in many, many different places. But John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." So did you catch that? For God so loved the world, and the world includes every person in it. It wasn't God so loved all the animals. That's not what he was referring to. He was actually referring to the people. So even if we feel like we're not loved by the people in our lives, we can know that God loves us. And that's huge, because to know that an all powerful creator of the universe, someone who is bigger than anything we can imagine, to think that someone like that loves us, I mean, we should feel really special. Okay, so let's recap that for a second. We're created in God's image. We're created either male or female, and we're loved. We're loved by God. Now, the next thing I'm going to say is something that is part of my identity. Remember, I said I'm a Christian. And if you're also a Christian, if you believe in Jesus and you've put your faith in him, then this will be true of you as well. Even if it's not true of you, hear me out. So I identify also as a child of God, and that's mentioned in the Bible as well. In 1 John 3:1, it says, "See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are." If you believe in Jesus and have put your faith and trust in him, then part of your identity, in fact, the strongest, most solid part of your identity, is that you're a child of God. That means we're included in his family and we're protected by him. We even see the protection that he offers his children mentioned in the Bible. So in 2 Thessalonians 3:3, it says, "But the Lord is faithful. He will establish and guard you against the evil one." So there you can see that God offers his protection. Another place where he mentions protecting us is in Psalms 46:1. There it says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." So in that situation, it mentions him being our refuge. So it's, he's a place that we can go to when we need to be protected from whatever it is, whatever's going on in the world. We can go to him as our refuge. And it's also comforting to know it says that he's a very present help in trouble. So whenever we're facing trouble, we're facing difficulties, we can count on God to help us. Another thing that the Bible points out about being a child of God is that we'll always be a child of God. That relationship as being a child of God lasts forever. So in John 3:16, remember it said that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. And that's also a really comforting thing to know that even after we die and we pass away from this earth, that we still go on to have a whole other life that we spend with with God and with other Christians, right? The parts of my identity that I feel are unchanging is the fact that I'm female, I'm created by God, I have dignity, value, and purpose, I'm loved by God, and I am a child of God. And those things are foundational to everything else. Yes, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a coworker, all of those things. But even if any one of those things, those other things changes, if I'm no longer a wife, if I am unemployed, if, you know, no matter what it is that changes with those other things, I am still created by God. I'm still female. I am still loved by God. I still have dignity, value, and worth. And I'm still a child of God. And having those foundational truths to base my identity on, it is very grounding, and it is a comfort, and it gets to the bottom of who I really am. It becomes what those things are actually my authentic identity. You can't get any more true than that. So I know you may be listening to this video and you say, okay, that's great. I was tracking until you came across this Bible stuff. Um, I don't read the Bible, or I don't believe the Bible, or maybe you're not a Christian, or maybe you are a Christian and maybe everything I've said resonated and it just solidified for you what you already knew to be true. But if it didn't resonate with you, the parts from the Bible, I encourage you to read it. Just go find a Bible. You don't even have to have a physical copy. You can look it up online. Read the Bible for yourself. Look up these verses that I've gone over and read them for yourself and ask God to show you the truth. Now you might say, but I don't believe in God. Well, can't hurt for you to do it anyway, because God will show you the truth. If you earnestly seek the truth, He'll show it to you. I've also heard stories where people were not necessarily earnestly seeking God, but they did want to know the truth about things, and just kind of said it, God, if you're true, you're going to have to show me. And amazingly, we're shown that God is real. So, again, my goal is to bring the Christian worldview into the conversations that we're having today. That's why I've included these Bible verses and why I've shared how the Bible is foundational to my own identity. So, hopefully, today's conversation has given you something to think about and helps you to define your own identity. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like me to go into more detail on that we talked about today. You can also leave in the comments topics that you would like to hear me talk about in the future. And be sure to tune in next week as I dive into another topic that people are passionate about: careers. See you next time.